Welcome, everybody. This is Mike Hirsch, pinch hitting for Sluggo Wasserman. He will be with us very soon. We're going to start out a with two poems from our poet laureate, Mimi German. I hope that pronounced your name right. Mimi, if you could launch us out. And then as soon as Mimi's done, we're going to get into some cutting edge reporting from directly from Washington, D.C., where a bunch of activists are lobbying members of Congress to challenge the legitimacy of the Trump election based on his participation in the insurrection on January 6th. But for now, we're going to start out with two wonderful poems. Please take it away, Mimi.
Well, it's Mimi Gurman, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right, Mimi?
It is Gurman. Mm-hmm.
Mimi Gurman, thank you so much,
Good
Marla.
night. Mm-hmm. So I attempted to write a poem about my feelings about Leonard still being in prison, and it is definitely not ready for prime time, that's for sure. So I found two very short poems that suit this time, I think. And the first one is just called Haiku. Peace walks on water, too radical to flower, seeding only dreams. The second poem is called Murmurings in the Canyon. I live in the southeastern corner of Oregon, surrounded by canyons and all of the wildlife that comes along with this area. Murmurings in the Canyon. It's up to the people to free all the people in order for the people to be free, said Coyote.
Lovely.
Thanks. Looking forward to the show.
Thank you so much, Mimi. And I think what we're going to do is start out with a deep dive into the controversy surrounding fluoridation of public water supplies. Is that correct? Are we ready for that presentation? That would be Doug.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
I'm going to read a little bit first. So my dad was a lifelong conservative Republican, but also a devout Christian, like Jimmy Carter. He followed Carter's example and did Habitat for Humanity. So when Jimmy Carter was governor of Georgia, the state passed a mandatory water fluoridation law, and Carter likely signed it. In 2016, civil rights leader Andrew Young, a good friend of Carter's, wanted the Georgia fluoridation law repealed and an end to fluoridation. So I wrote to Carter asking him to talk to Young about fluoridation. Carter kindly responded to my letter, writing that he would talk to Young about it, but I don't know if that conversation ever took place. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. Okay.
Are you ready to sink your
Yeah.
teeth into the presentation?
Yeah, okay. This is a picture of mild dental fluorosis, which is increasing in the US. The chance of a person getting this goes up when as an infant they get a big doses of fluoride, such as when fluoride-fed infant formula prepared with fluoridated tap water. In other words, if a parent takes some powdered infant formula, prepares it with fluoridated tap water, they get a gigantic dose of fluoride. Wait a second. Okay, this is another photo of mild dental fluorosis with brown staining. As an infant, this person was fed infant formula prepared with fluoridated water. This photo shows severe fluorosis, which means the teeth are pitted, the enamel chips away, and there are brown stains and they get tooth decay. This happens with 3 times higher levels of fluoride in the tap water than in standard tap water. Until the 1980s, the government considered this an adverse health effect. But in the 1980s, pressure from advocates for fluoridation and regulatory concerns resulted in the EPA declaring this was only a cosmetic effect. I include this to show problems within the EPA regulatory process. Can't seem to advance the to the next slide here.
Okay, while you're working on that, we have John Fitzgerald from Congress. John, how long can you stay? Do you have to get going in the near term, or can we get to you after the fluoride presentation?
You can take me after the fluoride presentation. I just got home from the Hill and I'm all set. Take your
Thank
time.
you so much, John.
You bet.
And so keep going, Greg, if you can figure
Oh,
out.
yeah,
There you
okay, now
go.
it just advanced. Okay. This is another photo of severe dental fluorosis. This basically, this is a very rare condition that occurs with high levels of fluoride in the tap water. Okay, here, fluoridation is considered a public health trade-off. Less tooth decay, but more fluorosis. This chart shows the increase in fluorosis over time, and it's even higher today than when this chart was made. The top chart shows what happens was expected to happen in 1950, but the bottom chart shows what actually happened. Fluorosis has gone way up, but the benefit has gone way down and has disappeared in some data. Fluoride toothpaste has helped, and it has reduced or eliminated the benefit of fluoridation.
Sorry about that, everybody. Not sure what happened there, but please continue, Greg. Oh, Doug, I'm sorry.
Doug, you got a mute. Doug, unmute, please.
Well, while we're waiting for Doug to unmute, Marla, you
Oh,
had your
I just
hand up?
unmuted it. I saw the button. Okay.
Oh, good.
Basically, what I asked for the to a little advisory to put in the water quality report to advise parents to use non-fluoridated water than when they're preparing infant formula. Now, this chart shows the gigantic dose these infants get in terms of fluoride. As you can see, it's way higher than any adult would get and much higher than a breastfed baby would get. Now, what happens is if an infant continued this dose for many years, they would probably get a big risk of severe dental fluorosis and maybe even skeletal fluorosis. Once again, I can't seem to advance the slide.
Okay, while you're working on that, Marla, do you have a question for this topic right now, or did you have something else you needed to say?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm really curious about the yeah, but I was really wanting to wait until after the presentation.
Okay,
So
that's great.
I
That's
do have a
great.
question for Doug, but not for this moment.
Well, I'm wondering if I was talking to somebody named S. Caruso who said he has the presentation. He said he could run it for me because even though it runs perfectly fine on my computer, now that I'm on this Zoom call, I can't seem to advance the slides, you know?
Gotcha. That would be Steve Caruso. Steve.
Yeah, even if you hit the space bar, it's not working then. I can bring it up. Hold on a second. Give me
Yeah, so Doug, if you could stop sharing for a minute and then
Okay.
let Steve step in.
I
And
gotta
thank you
figure out
so
how to
much for
stop
this
sharing.
information so far. Yeah, all good.
I gotta figure out how to stop the share.
Okay.
Uh,
The wonderful world of Zoom strikes
Yeah.
again. Steve, maybe if you start, it will preempt Doug's share.
Sure.
yeah, I can't seem, I don't know what button to hit to stop the share, you know?
But we hear you, Doug. We're going to try to preempt you. So to summarize what you've done so far, and thank you so much for this terrific presentation. What you're saying is that, especially for infants, but even for adults and older children, fluoride can be dangerous and not worth the risk.
Well, I'm not going, a lot of people want to stop fluoridation in general, but that's not going to happen for a long time if it happens at all in Los Angeles. So I'm just going for the, I'm going for the easy to make field goal versus the touchdown. In other words, I just want to protect people as much as possible. And infants, okay, now here's my next slide. If an infant got the same dose they get when they get basically fluoridated infant formula, powdered infant formula prepared with fluoridated tap water, that's a gigantic dose. If they continue that dose on for a number of years, they could get skeletal fluorosis. This is skeletal fluorosis in India, where it curves bones. And that doesn't happen in the United States, but we do have a lot of adults with skeletal fluorosis in the United States. Well, actually, we don't know how many because it's not a reportable disease. Basically, and doctors are not trained to recognize it. In the US, a typical adult case could be a person who drank an excessive amount of iced tea along with fluoridated water. Tea is high in fluoride. They would have pain that might go undiagnosed for years until they came across a knowledgeable doctor who told them to cut out the iced tea. And after they did that, their pain would go away. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. These are reasons why this advisory should be widespread. Infants 0 to 6 months of age are no longer prescribed fluoride supplements. Preparing infant formula with a fluoridated tap water is like giving your baby a fluoride supplement. The stated adequate fluoride intake for these infants is only 0.01 milligrams per day. That's roughly the tiny amount of fluoride found in breast milk. The CDC says any additional fluoride provides no additional benefit. Thus, this is a risk for no reward situation for these infants. Powdered infant formula is manufactured without fluoride, but still has trace amounts equal to what's in breast milk. Okay, next slide. The huge increase in fluorosis seen in American children as a result of fluoridation has resulted in 2 reductions in the amount of fluoride added to tap water, one in 1962 and one in 2015. In Los Angeles, the amount of fluoride added to tap water was reduced slightly. Over half of American children now have dental fluorosis, although sometimes it's barely visible. The CDC, the American Dental Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics have advised parents to consider the use of non-fluoridated water to prepare infant formula. With substantial scientific evidence showing fluoride can reduce IQ due to prenatal exposure and young children ingesting fluoride, this advisory is even more important today. This relatively new science is the reason fluoridation has been in the national news. Next science. There has been backroom, unwritten opposition to having this advisory appear on water quality reports due to concerns it could affect the public perception of water fluoridation. So the question is, will Los Angeles do what's best for these infants or do what's best for the reputation of water fluoridation? Next slide. There's been a lot of false information seen in recent major news stories and editorials supporting fluoridation. This CNN news article has one of the biggest falsehoods I've seen, and this is from an article that's fairly balanced. It's fairly balanced between both sides and mostly has good information. Whoops, next slide. I want to go forward. Okay, yeah. See here, there's 3 charts here. As you can, I don't know if you can see my arrow, maybe not, but there's basically 3 charts to represent how much fluoride's in the tap water with the public water system. Oops. Yeah, okay. And basically, this is from this CNN article, which appeared in November. Now, as you can see on the right, we'll go to the next slide. I'll show you what's on this right-hand column. Next slide. The right-hand column says 2 water systems in South Carolina have exceeded the WHO guidelines of above 1.5 milligrams per liter. Okay, next slide. And this is what the this is below the chart on the CNN article. The data source CNN used actually has 15 of these water systems in South Carolina, not 2. And that's just one state. There are hundreds of these water systems in the US reporting data to the CDC. Okay, next slide. And that's it. Basically, we have a lot of water systems in the United States with high levels of natural fluoride. And in these water systems, people are not being adequately notified, especially the parents. Basically, as I said before, this is because some people who advocate for fluoridation want to protect the reputation of fluoridation, don't want basically water with fluoride to be proper advice given about it. So hopefully in Los Angeles, the water system has already given me a positive response to my suggestion. So they might actually include this advice in their next water quality report. Now, that's about as far as I can go as a public citizen to getting the advice out there. But at least if it's in a water quality report, even though not many people are going to look at it or see it, it's publicly available, and I can point to it and say, look what the city water department says. Because
Doug,
unfortunately,
Doug, hold on for a second. Thanks so much for your presentation. We have 3 hands up right now, so we'll go to those questions, and then we'll continue on after that, if that's okay.
sure.
So Lynn Feinerman, your question, please.
Yes, hi, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Doug. My understanding is that California water supply is by law fluoridated. And I am wondering how individual citizens or how the people can counteract this while we are under the effects of fluoridation. Is water filtering effective? Is there anything that can be done to clean tap water in this regard?
Yes, well, let's talk about the mandatory law first. In 1995, the mandatory law was passed. Now, it was an unfunded mandate. The legislators weren't going to pay money for this. So what it means is that if somebody comes to your town with a big pile of money, and they can force your town to fluoridate, but towns are not forced to fluoridate in California unless somebody comes along with a huge amount of money to pay for the infrastructure. But this law did result indirectly in the fluoridation of Los Angeles and San Diego, which had resisted fluoridation for decades before that. Now, in terms of removing fluoridated water, there's 2 very good systems that can remove pretty much all the fluoride in your tap water. There's reverse osmosis and distillation. There's other filters, but they often are not very effective after a period of a month or 2. The basic thing is you want to avoid fluoride as much as you can, just for your general health. Now, obviously, fluoride toothpaste is effective. If you have a tooth decay problem, fluoride applications by the dentist, fluoride toothpaste, they can help reduce tooth decay. But the point we're trying to make is that we don't want to be swallowing it. And of course, people only consume 1% of the tap water that's produced. So 99% of the water fluoride added to tap water just becomes an environmental pollutant, goes down the drain. And most of the world has rejected water fluoridation. In Europe, only 98% of the water in Europe is non-fluoridated. Most of the countries in the world have rejected this. About 7 have rejected it after they started doing it within the last few decades. The last country to reject water fluoridation was Israel. It stopped it several years ago. So in certain cases, fluoridation may help reduce tooth decay, but the benefit is very, very small now, if it's anything. And we believe the risks are worse than the
Thank you.
rewards.
We've got a
Yeah.
few more questions, and then we'll continue. Dr. Ruth Strauss, please.
Hi, thank you so much. I was really looking forward to this because it's an area in my medical knowledge that's really vacant. What I wanted to ask you is, do you have and of course, the medical profession is always kind of late to the party, so I'm actually very glad to see that the Academy of Pediatrics has come out with a, warning about this. Do you know, and I could do a search, but I'm just going to ask you, do you know of any papers on the neurologic problems with fluoride, and is it in utero? Is it during the first year? Could I be getting demented because I'm still brushing my teeth with tap water? Or maybe I'm just going to be demented and never mind the tap water. But do you have any information on that?
Well, it's interesting what happened here in 2006. This fluorosis risk from infant formula was first admitted. But then it became a powerful talking point in referendums on fluoridation. Sometimes people get to vote on it, whether they want it in their tap water or not. So by 2011, 2012, the advice from, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is for strong supporters of fluoridation, they basically didn't want to inform their membership about this fluorosis risk. They wanted to suppress this information as much as possible because it cast a negative light on fluoridation in general. So, for example, the American Dental Association, they first said, well, tell the parents to use non-fluoridated water to prepare infant formula. But by 2011, they changed that advice to saying, well, the healthcare provider can recommend fluoridated water for infant formula preparation as long as the healthcare provider was aware of the fluorosis risk. But they never said the parents had to be informed, which is the problem. The parents aren't being informed. And this has happened basically because, like I said, they want to maintain the reputation of fluoridation. In Ireland, when this came out in 2006, the chief fluoridationist said, well, this could mean the end of fluoridation in Ireland. So they said, well, we're not going to make this advice standard. So that's what I'm trying to do, get this advice to become more standardized. Now, in terms of the neurotoxic risk, it's primarily for unborn babies and young children. This is where the IQ studies have found a reduced IQ. Now, if you're an adult, you know, what happens if you drink fluoridated water your whole life? There's going to be more fluoride in your bones. It goes into your bones like lead goes into your bones. Probably not good, but if you're an adult, the risk is probably a lot less for a neurotoxic effect. I would suggest going to the Fluoride Action Network if you want to read up on the neurotoxic effects.
Hey, Doug, if you could drop the link for that network, that would be great. And I want to pass the baton over to Sluggo Wasserman. Thanks for
Doug,
hopping in,
can you
Sluggo.
guys,
Go ahead.
hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you, Harvey. And,
Okay, I'm
and
with
Harvey,
you. Thank you,
Harvey.
Doug. A very powerful, important presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is one thing that I support. Not that I have teeth to brag about, but I support the banning of fluoride. The thing that convinced me is that when kids are growing up, you make baby formula with tap water. A lot of people do, and we did, and then it gets, if there's fluoride in the tap water, it gets concentrated in the formula. I mean, it's very disturbing to me. So anyway, it was a good presentation. Nancy Naparco, is Nancy on? Did she want to speak? And then we're going to go to John Fitzgerald. And Myla, go ahead.
I could speak. I'm not really prepared to speak, but I have a couple concerns. Number one, I'm one of those kids who grew up before fluoride was in the water, and excuse me, I just went up some steps, and had lots of cavities. And I am thrilled that there are generations since then with kids who don't have cavities. And I had begun to look this up and saw the figure that due to the fluoridation, there are 25% fewer cavities. As a neurologist, I will tell you that you got to understand that there are some pretty direct vascular connections between the brain and the teeth and the gums. And cavities are a major source of abscesses in the brain and encephalitis. So I haven't, I'm no expert on what fluoride has done to intelligence, and I don't know if anyone knows how that happens or why it would happen. But those are my responses.
Okay, well, listen, thank you, Nancy. We always love to hear from you. Myla, and then we're going to move on. I think we'll continue this in the new year. It's an important discussion, especially if Bobby Kennedy becomes head of HEW. This will be bitterly contested. And so it's something that we will come back to. Doug, beautiful presentation. Nancy, thank you for your comment. And Dr. Ruth, Myla, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Nancy and Doug, this is a question for both of you, and I'd like to know if there's any evidence that you have come across that drinking fluoridated water or consuming fluoride, as opposed to having it applied topically, has any bearing whatsoever on tooth decay. Does drinking fluoridated water prevent tooth decay, or is it only the topical application of fluoride?
Well, there's a slight
Go on.
Can I go first? There's a
Yeah, very
slight
quickly,
topical
Doug, then Nancy, and then we're gonna move on. Go ahead. Thank you for that, Mara.
There's a slight topical application. When you put fluoridated water in your mouth, it mixes with the saliva a little bit. Some of it can go into the outer layers of your tooth enamel, helping that way.
Question
But
is, the question, Doug, is there any evidence that drinking it has any impact whatsoever on tooth decay? That's the
if you
question.
go, yeah, if you go way back to the origins of fluoridation, they thought by drinking it, children would be protected. But the modern dental research says the method of benefit is primarily topical, and very, very small benefit from actually swallowing it and going down into your stomach. The benefit from that is very, very tiny if it exists at all, according to the modern dental research.
Okay, Nancy and Parco, you want to respond?
I haven't done that amount of research. I just came across on, I think it was a CDC website, that tooth decay was reduced 25% when the water was fluoridated generally around the country.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're going to return to this. Myla, good question. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll come back to this in the new year. It is going to be a big issue. Very good presentation, both, and very good questions. We got more than 60 people with us. We want to go to John Fitzgerald. I do want to mention the main reason we're meeting in the holiday season, aside from our other good work, is to remind us to work to get Leonard Peltier out of prison before Trump comes in and kills him. So we really need to be very aware of that. We have Lori Grace with us who's working on that. We will come back to that before the end of the call. But we want to go now to the campaign on the third section of the 14th Amendment. John Fitzgerald, are you with us? And can you start to jump in with us, please? And welcome everybody. We're up to 65 people already.
Thank you,
ahead,
Harvey.
John.
I am with you, but my video refuses to start, so we'll have to make do. You might be more grateful actually that it's not on, but let's go ahead.
Yeah, well, likewise here. So go ahead, John, please.
All right, Harvey, our good friend Stephen Spitz from the Progressive Democrats for America Virginia chapter just joined me for the better part of the day, going door to door in the Congress on the House side. My partner, Christine Realia was doing the Senate side. We started with hard copies of the petition, which I will summarize now. We were leaving those in offices. The petition is patterned after successful petitions filed throughout history that you can find in a guide to precedents of the Congress called Dessler's Precedents. And I happen to have found it, but I recommend that you Google it if you want to find it. It has examples of instances where citizens have challenged the seating of a member of Congress because that member was disqualified or unqualified according to the Constitution. It's usually used for contested elections or when a member does no longer reside in the state from which he was elected. In this case, we would seek to ban the seating of members of Congress first and then move on to the president next. This is because there were over 120 Republicans who voted to block the count of Pennsylvania and Arizona electoral votes on January 6, 2021, the very day of the insurrection attack on the Capitol. There are 6 senators, or maybe 7, depending how you want to count the 2 votes, including Ted Cruz, who led the fight on the Senate side to block that voting. And on the House side, it was Paul Gosar of Arizona and none other than Mike Johnson of Louisiana on the House side. Those members could be disqualified by the non-challenged, non-tainted members under Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 1, which the Constitution gives Congress, the sole power to determine the qualifications of its own members, each House. Those qualifications include determining whether a member has been disqualified, as many were after the Civil War, for participating in an insurrection against the Constitution and aiding and abetting that insurrection. We now have a similar pattern, and indeed, the Civil War was not the first time. There was a plot to keep Abe Lincoln from taking office at all. That was foiled. But when they wrote the 14th Amendment, they had that in mind as well as the Civil War itself. So we would start there. We suggest that the members set aside those members and not seat them, they would be replaced either by a governor appointment or a special election. But in the meantime, the Congress would proceed to invoke the Electoral Count Act, which provides for instances where votes for disqualified or unqualified candidates for president cannot be counted, can be set aside. This is an instance of that. We have two Supreme Courts, Colorado and Maine. We have three committees of Congress that have found Donald J. Trump to be disqualified by virtue of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which basically provides that anyone who participates in or lends aid and comfort to an insurrection that attempts to block the proper implementation of the Constitution may not hold public, that is federal or state office. So the members of Congress who are then in Congress would then vote to invoke the Electoral Count Act. It takes a certain number, I believe it's 20% of each house, which would be easy to get, to begin that process, and then a majority actually to end it, as far as I know. And I haven't read the act. It was amended in 22, but that provides essentially for setting aside electoral votes for Trump. Then Harris would be instructed, in fact, not only free, but instructed not to vote those votes because he's disqualified by any stretch of the imagination and by 5 different entities that provided that finding, 2 Supreme Courts in the states and 3 committees of Congress, at least 2. Anyway, if Trump were disqualified, then it goes to the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment says, if no single candidate has a majority of electoral votes, the House of Representatives will decide who will be president, but their choice is limited to 3 people, the top 3 vote getters of electoral votes. In this election, we only have 2 recipients of electoral votes. They are Trump and Harris. Therefore, by working of the 12th Amendment, Harris would become president, and the question would then become, does she take J.D. Vance as her vice president or not? Our petition outlines 2 reasons at least why J.D. Vance is disqualified also, because of legislation he's introduced and sponsored and co-sponsored. One he sponsored and the other he co-sponsored, basically declaring that January 6, 2021 was not an insurrection, despite the findings of every authority on the planet. And number 2, his attempted legislation would have prevented the Department of Justice from suing Trump and his colleagues for participation in that. And so those 2 things are lending aid and comfort to insurrectionists after the fact. In other words, encouraging them to continue to resist and maybe try it again. And so we would say J.D. Vance is also disqualified, but that takes a vote of the Congress. So that is it in a nutshell, although there's plenty of detail. The petition itself is 8 pages long, single-spaced. I've got a 52-page memo giving further background on it, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And by the way, we delivered them today too.
Well,
Harris's
John,
office-
that's pretty.
I'll just say real quick. we delivered them to
That's like
Harris's office.
hearing a nuclear weapon go off in the house of the government here. Look at this. The 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War. The insurrectionists that they were aiming it at were, of course, the Confederates who rebelled and tried to leave the Union. And Donald Trump certainly fits that mold. What kind of response are you getting? I mean,
That's a
is
very
there
good
any
question.
chance that this is going to advance?
Harvey, that's a very good question. This is actually pretty neat stuff because it's all in black and white in the Constitution. 6 constitutional scholars that we cite in the memo and in the electronic version, we have links to their law review articles or their other publications explaining why they agree with this approach. But it takes a member of each house to advance the either resolution or the motion to do this. On the House side, many people would turn to Jamie Raskin because he led one of those committees that found that those facts to be.
John, are you saying just one? I'm sorry to interrupt. Just one member of each house can advance this?
Yes, each house can, any member can, when we start with the seating of the members themselves, it is generally what's called a privileged motion, which means it takes precedence over other business that may come before the body, because it has to do with making up the body itself. First, you have to decide who sits in the Congress. That's the first thing they do. So a member would make a motion saying, I move to disqualify these 6 senators. A senator would do that. They would be Ted Cruz and on down the list. They're in the congressional record of January 6th, by the way, in case you want to read it. About, that's a long way into it, but on the House side, you do the same thing. You cite the through recorded votes of people officially trying to block the Constitution, block Biden's electoral votes by not counting them. They were trying then to force that into the House, presumably, but all it takes is a member to make that. It takes obviously more than one member to pass it. Go ahead.
Mind-boggling, and you know, my unfortunate experience was in 2000. We couldn't get a single senator to agree to examine the vote count in Florida, which would have tossed the election from George W. Bush, rightfully so, to Al Gore, who actually won the vote count
That's
in
right.
Florida. But we
That's
couldn't
right.
get a single senator.
That's right. In
Even
fact,
though Al Gore was the vice president and Paul Wellstone was in the Senate, Gore blocked the constitutionally approved examination of the votes in Florida, and we never got it.
that's
And
right.
then
And
the
in fact,
Supreme
Harvey,
Court threw the presidency to George W. Bush.
in
Now
fact,
we have a situation where clearly Trump was an insurrectionist, clearly in violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was passed for this very specific purpose, to deal with insurrectionists. Are we going to get any kind of congressional hearing? That's the question we have. It's incredibly frustrating. Anyway, 64 people with us. Mike Hirsch, go ahead, please, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to offer a quick reminder that this is a nonpartisan Zoom. However, we do stand up for the Constitution, which is nonpartisan and doesn't even reference political parties at all. So we're supporting the Constitution, and this is something that every conservative should do, every strict constructionist should do, if there are any of them still left in the Congress. And thanks so much, Lugo.
could I make a point there? The people who petitioned, the secretaries of state in Maine and the courts in Colorado,
Lori Grace,
bipartisan groups.
Lori, did you want to chime in here and have, does it say Merry Holidays behind you? Whatever. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say that I'm very excited about what John Fitzgerald has talked about. And I know he's been walking around Congress. I still haven't heard a clear description of how he was received or not. So I'd really like to know that. And I know that he's planning to stay, because I talked to him, till January 6th or 7th. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the initial reception and with whom.
Well, John, that's a fair
Few
question.
A few notes.
You haven't been tarred or feathered yet. So what exactly is the response to your travels around the Congress?
Well, although the buildings are open, the Congress doesn't reconvene until tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure some of the key offices had a paper copy as well as an email copy. And in fact, the clerk of the House refuses email and refuses to have a delivery in person. So we had to do that by U.S. Postal Service, overnight delivery to the clerk. The Senate secretary is much more friendly. In fact, we talked to the lady who runs the Senate secretary's office today, had a pleasant conversation, outlined the petition, and she sent it over to the parliamentarians' office because they take the next steps on this. We also had a brief conversation, a very pleasant conversation, with Vice President Harris's office manager in her office in the Senate, because she's also president of the Senate. And in that capacity, she will count the votes. So we were well received there. The other offices, by and large, were closed. So we simply had to leave our petition under the door in this case, although we've sent it by email to a great number of people. But we have strategically selected the signers so far to include Jamie Raskin's constituents, and several other key folks. And we've had recently a couple of other folks join us, although we do very much appreciate anyone who can sign on. Thank you.
Well, there's clearly a solid constitutional ground for this. I know that the famous Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe has chimed in on this. Somebody needs to write a definitive piece, or if there is one out there, to send it. Steve Caruso, maybe you're aware of it, if such a piece exists. Myla Reeson, did you want to comment? And then Doug?
Yeah, I do. I just want to thank Lori and Andrew for their work on getting people to Washington to lobby Congress. And I put a link in the chat, which is really easy for people who might be listening. And that's, there's a train behind me, but for people who are listening, the website is nowmarch.org. And there's a link in the website for, there is an effort to get people to Washington to lobby. And I'm wondering, John, will the offices be open in the next few days? I was kind of distracted, and I'm not sure whether you mentioned that Congress would have to be there.
They come back into session tomorrow, but how long they remain in session tomorrow is another question. But they're certainly in session on the 3rd, which is the first day of the convening of the next Congress. They'll be fully busy all throughout the day, the 3rd. And then on the 6th, they will be counting the electoral votes. That is, the president of the Senate, Ms. Harris, will do that. And so they'll be very much in session the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. But until then, we have our homework to prepare these people.
So what exactly, I know you went over it, but if you could just repeat, what exactly are we asking our representatives in Congress to do on the 6th?
On the 6th, we would ask them to basically instruct through the Electoral Vote Count Act, which was amended in 22, or maybe they could act without it, because one Congress does not bind the next Congress in its actions, but they can do it either way. They would simply be instructing Harris not to count the electoral votes cast for a disqualified person, namely Donald Trump, who has been disqualified by every institution that has had a contested hearing on that, including the House of Representatives and including the Colorado and Maine authorities, including the Supreme Courts of those two states.
Oh, well, we will meet again in a week, which will, I guess, be December 5th. Is that right? Tomorrow, of course, is a national holiday because it's my 79th birthday. And then January 1st, I'll be 80. So, but
The next
I think our
meeting
next meeting
is
will
January
Monday is January 5th. Is that right?
6th.
All right. So we'll be meeting January 6th, and we'll be discussing this in great detail. Dave Saltman, and then Doug. Dave, go ahead, please. Got to unmute you, bro. And then Doug, you brought this up at Dave in the last gathering. Go ahead.
Happy birthday, Harvey! Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're almost 80. You and me are the same age. So
my age is finally matching my IQ. So go ahead.
By the way, I don't have the hand thing on my. All
right, don't worry about it. We got you.
Yeah, just keep going.
And
go ahead, and then we go to Doug.
I can't see the chat either, so I don't know why.
No problem. Just keep going.
Stating the facts. Okay, so here I have two questions. Even I thought this was a great idea. I pitched it last time. Here are my two questions. Number one, if let's say that the Trump's bid is rejected and he can't be president, does that automatically trigger the line of succession? In other words, does that mean Vance is president?
No.
Question number two, to what degree do you think that if Trump is denied the presidency, this would lead to a civil war?
Two good questions. I've got good answers for him.
Let's hear it.
Okay. First answer is no. If Trump is denied the presidency, the 12th Amendment kicks in, which then says if nobody had a majority of the electoral votes cast, the House then votes a vote of one vote per state in the House, and they might be Republican majority, but they must choose from the top 3 recipients of electoral votes. In this election, we only have 2 recipients of electoral votes. As far as I know, it's Harris and Trump. Therefore, by default, the House could only choose Harris and she would become the president. And therefore,
that would be something to write about. Oh my God. Good questions, Dave, as always. Thank you.
I have it, Harvey, he had a second question. He says, what about the Civil War we're going to trigger, or the insurrection again? And the last paragraph in our memorandum, which was also sent to the mayor of Washington, who happens to be in charge of the National Guard of Washington, was that she and the Capitol Police and the Sergeant at Arms would do well to prepare 2 things. 1, to set aside those members who are to be denied seating because they supported the insurrection or lent aid and comfort thereto, and not let them on the floor, or maybe sequester them outside the building so they don't cause a ruckus. And number 2 is to have people prepared to keep order in the Capitol well in advance of January 3rd, like on the 2nd or so from then on. That's all.
Well, but of course, the Civil War would involve a lot more than the Capitol.
Yes.
So maybe there would be an agreement between the red states and the blue states to separate. I would love to see California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii become a country. We would call it Ecotopia, as Ernest Callenbach did 50 years ago.
Yep.
But listen, this is Donald Trump only won by the tightest margin since 1968 in the popular vote. He won by less than 2 million votes. So, and then in 1960, those are the 3 most the tightest elections in the last 70 years. So, it's not an overwhelming majority. And by the way, I have to say it's been highly interesting the splits that have developed in the Trump world. Today, Steve Bannon, Trump's chief advisor, vehemently attacked Elon Musk. I was shocked to see that. So who knows what's going to happen here? But Dave, those are great questions, and we will be able to discuss it in a week. It's way more. The transition period with Trump has been way more interesting than any of us ever imagined. I mean, my God, what total chaos. I think we have a civil war going on already, frankly, and it's on the right. The left, of course, in the Democratic Party has been completely asleep. If Kamala was somehow chosen by the Congress, they'd have to wake her up. I mean, she's completely disappeared. Okay, Doug, Mike, and then, Mike, you had a hand, and then back to Lori and John. Doug Crago, and we are going to cease at the top of the hour. I do want to again remind everybody that we are working very hard to get Leonard Peltier out. I know Lori is committed to it, and we really need to sign the Amnesty International petition and call the White House. I mean, it's just outrageous that he hasn't been freed. I do want to throw in one more thing. I cannot resist. There was an interview with President Biden, and he said in the interview that if he had not stepped down and that Kamala had not been the nominee, but that he would have won. I'm just going to leave that for what it is. But that is a bona fide interview with Doug Biden.
Ron Fitzgerald.
Joe Biden. Doug Crago, go ahead then.
I would like to hear
back to John.
I would like to hear a little bit about the prosecution of people that tried to make Trump president 4 years ago. I know at least one lawyer. I think some of the people have volunteered to be electors. Some of these people are being prosecuted. I'd like to hear about those prosecutions, if there's any news on those.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's been varying from court to court. But I can't. Mike, do you have a definitive word on what's happening with the various January 6th prosecutions?
I think that they're pretty much on hold because Trump has vowed to pardon them for doing that. Um, which is probably another reason why he should be kept out of the White House.
Yep.
It's like if anybody's had an infestation of cockroaches or something, you get rid of them, you think they're gone. Here they come back again. My question was, does the House have to select the president? Is it a may or shall? And what if they refuse to select anybody for president? What happens then?
I believe that the 12th Amendment is not a permissive amendment. It's a process that is required. And it really wouldn't make much sense not to have it. That is, let's put it this way, unless all of the electoral vote recipients were disqualified, which Harris is not, if in some future moment there were 2 disqualified candidates and nobody got any electoral votes, then your question would lie. But right now, I think it's mandatory.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We will put stuff out about this through our mailing list. I'm going to try and develop an article about it or some kind of document so there's clarity. This is this has never happened in US history, as you all know. As I will repeat, in 2000, where there was clear fraud and election disenfranchisement in Florida, more than enough to change the electoral outcome, having nothing to do with Ralph Nader. We could not get a single senator among the Democrats to come forward and ask for the committee hearings that were mandated in the Constitution. The real question will be, will there be a senator willing to come forward to put this on the floor? Reminding you that we couldn't get it done. Not one would come forward in 2000. One of the worst moments in American history, as far as I'm concerned. And the guy who made sure that nobody came forward was Al Gore. Al Gore threatened U.S. Democratic senators against coming forward and demanding the constitutionally mandated recount in Florida. It was outrageous. So is it going to happen again? Well, when we meet, we'll know. But, what can I tell you? I'm not a senator. So here we go. Lori Grace, you are a senator. How will you vote
I'm not a
on
senator.
January 6th?
Okay, so I just wanted to say there's 2 things. One is some of you may know about a concurrent effort from this woman, Jessica Denson. It's a whole nother topic. And John Fitzgerald, I've been really impressed with how you are doing this. When I hear you say we got to stay over the weekend and get our act together, I definitely support that. I've been involved deeply in earlier elections. And also there could be, with senators not stepping forward, some fear about reprisals,
Mhm.
So we have to think together with them about their security and what can we offer, what can we not offer, just that kind of thing. So I think for those people who want to be deeply involved, coming over is an excellent thing. And even doing it, over the weekend and getting really prepared. I know that Bob Fitrakis and I, when we were fighting things, we got really prepared. We tried to let's even bring in Spoonemore. Let's get everybody organized. Brett Kimberlin, different people. So that's what I support.
Could I reply?
Of course.
Thank you so much for that. John, do you have something else? And then we're gonna go to Steve. We are gonna adjourn in 6 minutes. So anybody else want to jump in? Raise your hand now, please.
Okay.
And again, remember Leonard Peltier, please.
Of course.
Steve Caruso, go ahead.
I thought I was going to reply to Lori.
I'm sorry, John Fitzgerald, then Steve, go ahead.
Well, I agree with Lori. It takes persistence in these times, and our time is short. But I also, not but, I mean, and I would like to add that your point earlier, Harvey, about Trump winning by a slim margin, I would say that if you look at what the Brennan Center at the New York University School of Law has done in assessing the changes in voting procedures in over 20 states, to curtail access to the vote in one way or the other, helped Trump, hurt the Democratic vote, and is blatantly illegal under Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, which is not included in our petition, but is treated in my longer memo. Had that not been done, had they not curtailed access intentionally, I don't think Trump would have gotten the majority of the votes in the swing states, especially. So I'll stop there.
Yes, well, it's certainly, Greg Palast argued on our call that between 10 and 20 million people were disenfranchised, mostly people of color. We've been through this before. It just makes my blood boil. So, Steve Caruso, Donald Smith, and again, remember Leonard Peltier, please. Steve, I see you put this up.
Yeah. So we went through this in 2020, and I was screaming, holy heck, that 14.3 should be invoked. None of these people who supported the lying in chief should have been in office because they were supporting the insurrection, regardless of the court cases, the outcomes. And now with the strip and flip election, as Harvey and Bob wrote about how many decades ago, okay, it seems like this is what it's come down to, that we've been gish-galloped the results. We've been slammed into the wall with this garbage of electronic voting and compilation, and here we are. So yeah, if we had this done in 2020, we wouldn't have had all these problems past 4 years. We did great. I mean, people did great. The government did great in some respects, but having the insurrections in the office for 4 years and the guy in the background screaming and hollering all the garbage that he's been doing, it's just should have been gone. It should have never happened. Thank you.
100% right. Donald Smith, and then we're going to adjourn. Oh, John and Mike, you raised your hands. That's going to do it. Go ahead, Donald, please. Got to unmute you. John Fitzgerald, go ahead.
So my question is,
Donald.
In order to apply the amendment, someone has to make the determination that there was an insurrection. Who gets to make that determination? If it's Republicans, Republicans are going to vote no, and the Republicans have a bare majority. So I'm just saying, is there any hope for this? Because someone has to make the determination that the amendment applies, and who makes that determination?
Well, listen, the least is that we would have lost in Florida probably if they followed the Constitution, but at least they would have followed the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, in a nonpartisan way, this discussion has to happen. It's outrageous that if they don't even bring it up, and clearly there was an insurrection. The question is there one U.S. senator willing to raise this issue? John Fitzgerald, Nicole Ung, and then Dave Saltman.
Harvey, thank you. I think
Donald, I didn't mean to short shrift you there, but the discussion has to be had. This should be discussed on the floor of the United States Congress, for God's sakes. John, go ahead.
Officially, you have a number of different people with jurisdiction over this question, but besides those folks, you have Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who early on in 2021 called for Trump's removal under the 25th Amendment, they're saying he was unfit to serve in office because of what he was doing with the insurrection on the 6th of January. And so Van Hollen, we've approached him to be one of the leaders on this. He wasn't in, but we'll hope to speak with him soon. And then, of course, you have Amy Klobuchar, chairs the committee with jurisdiction over election law from Minnesota. And of course, Chuck Schumer decides what goes to the floor and what doesn't in the Senate. So those are three quick answers over there.
All right, well said. Nicole and then Saltman. David, Nicole Ung and then Dave Saltman. I don't see what happened here. David, go ahead, Dave.
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fitzgerald, but my understanding is the question of whether or not insurrection was committed by Trump has already been adjudicated in the Colorado Supreme Court and in the lower courts in Colorado. And my understanding is that when the Supreme Court took up Trump versus Anderson, that was not an issue. The only issue was whether or not a federal nominee could be taken, whether a state court could take a federal nominee off of a federal ballot. But there was no discussion. That was considered res judicata, to use the legal term, which I
Res
probably got
judicata.
wrong.
That's right, David. That res judicata, not adjudicata, but we call it res judicata. But you're absolutely right. And the Supreme Court of the state of Maine also sustained the same finding by their Secretary of State, ours, as I live in Maine now. So you're right on all counts.
I know this is our last minute here, and I didn't want to interrupt you, John. I wanted to ask if you could focus us a little bit on what we can do to help you out. If being there in Washington with you, what would that scenario be? And if there's things we can do from home, what is that scenario that we can do to be supportive of you with your effort and your petition to move it forward in a serious way?
Thank you so much. I will give you a quick answer. You don't have to leave your home to do a lot. Call 202-225-3121, which is the Capitol operator phone number. Ask for your member of Congress, and then ask for your senator. He or she will patch you through, and you ask them to support or to make a motion on the floor to first eliminate those members of Congress from being seated on the third, who then voted back on the 6th day of January 2021, not to allow the Pennsylvania and Arizona electoral votes to be counted in order to further the insurrection plan. Next, they would then move to Trump, and on the 6th, they would instruct Harris not to vote the disqualified person into office. And as we've just heard, 3 or 4 different bodies have adjudicated that question. He is an insurrectionist, has lent an aid and support to the insurrection. He is therefore disqualified. The Supreme Court did not touch that issue. They said only Congress can figure out how to enforce it. I'll stop there.
Well, it's got to be dealt with. This can't be swept under the rug. Nicole, are you unmuted? Did you want to say something real quick?
Yes, I do. I couldn't unmute myself earlier.
You're good. You're good.
Forgive me. This is the first time I'm joining this group.
Okay.
I don't know if I can submit for your approval to discuss now or next time. I would like to ask if people can also ask Biden for a pardon for Mr. Little John. He's the IRS whistleblower who handed in, the tax return of Trump and all the billionaires. It showed how those oligarchs never paid in any taxes. And he's serving 6 years in prison. It was like multiple times, the normal sentence for a normal person. And we feel that Biden should pardon him. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a great presentation, and we can ask people to do that while they're also calling the White House to ask for clemency for Leonard Peltier.
Leonard Peltier and our buddy Steve as well.
And
Lori, Grace,
Little
and then
John,
we got to go, guys. Thank you, Mike. Anybody else want to jump in very quickly? Go ahead, Lori. I got to unmute you here. You're not. There you go, Lori. Grace, go ahead.
I really want to encourage people to make it over to Washington who are capable of doing that. Between Jessica Denson and what she's doing and what you, John, are doing, there's an amazing education in what's possible around elections. So I just wanted to emphasize that for those of you who can or know people who are in Washington or nearby, to come. It's going to be an incredible education in American attempts
Thank
at
you.
democracy.
Thank you, Lori. You've been great. You've been very supportive of all this. I do want to remind people we got to get, as Nicole has emphasized, we've got to get people out. Get Biden to, for God's sakes, pardon Leonard Peltier, do whatever is needed, remand him to his tribe, but get him out of prison before he dies. We have to deal with that. I do want to throw in also, by the way, there was a big court victory. We featured this many months ago. A group of young people in Montana made a major lawsuit on the climate, and they won. I put it in the invite. There's a link there. We'll send it out again, but this is a very big deal, a lawsuit that was won. And the New York Times today, I cannot resist this, another attack on renewable energy on the front page of the New York Times. I mean, these guys are really out to lunch, really pisses me off. I hope that's okay. Lynn, will you get the last word, Lynn Feinerman? We still have 61 people with us. Go ahead, Lynn. Oh, I got to ask you, so while I'm unmuting, I want to remind people, you are all required to go out and get drunk, stoned, or laid. Tomorrow is my birthday, and I think of me when you're enjoying yourself. Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, I just want to say, may the new year bring us strength, solidarity, and the capacity to be merry pranksters in the service of upheaval against the fascists.
Thank you, Lynn. Steve, do you want the last word? Steve Caruso, you raised your hand again.
Yeah, John had his hand up, I thought too, but yeah, the people that are insurrectionists should not be able to vote as part of the Electoral College. And that's how it works. So yeah, if somebody says, well, I vote this, well, no, you're an insurrectionist, then there'd be a big argument or kerfuffle, whatever. But that puts the stop in it right there. 20% of each chamber of Congress would need to vote to bring an objection. And then it would have to get a majority vote, and any insurrectionists that were involved would be excluded. So put an end to it. That should have been done in 2020. Nobody stood up to it. Everybody's playing namby-pamby with it. Let's go, folks. Thank you. Harvey,
And real
muted.
quick, Sluggo, I'm going to drop in a link so people can contact the White House and figure if Biden can pardon his own son, he can do the same for Steve Donziger, Leonard Peltier, and Nicole. Let's see, she's talking about Little John, Charles Little John.
And how about Mumia?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Mumia also. So thank you, everybody. This was a great meeting, really worth doing. We appreciate it. I had over almost 70 people. We will meet again in 2025, a week from today. I will be pushing 80 by then. And everybody have a great New Year's. Thank you, Steve, for engineering. Thank you, Mimi, for your poetry. And thank you, everybody. No nukes, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Harvey.
And next year.
Thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
See you all next year. And for those who tuned in to hear a more extensive discussion of Leonard Peltier, I apologize we weren't able to focus on that to the degree we'd hoped, but we did discuss Leonard's case quite a bit last week. So if you go to our website, grassrootsep.org, you can look up previous Zooms, and we basically covered all angles of that, and we will do so again. So keep the faith.
See you in Solartopia.
Happy birthday, Sluggo.
Thank you. Thank you.
And many
Happy
more.
birthday, Harvey.
No nukes, y'all.